Dear students, today we will discuss the fourth chapter of the Vistas textbook, supplementary textbook for class 12. The name of the chapter is The Enemy, written by Pearl Seidenstreicher Buck. And in this first video, we will discuss about the author, about the introduction, theme, and summary of this story. Now let us begin about the author. Pearl Seidenstreicher Buck, or Pearl S. Buck, born on 26 June 1892 and died on 6 March 1973, was an American writer and novelist. She is also known by her Chinese name, Sai Zhenzu. In 1932, she won Pulitzer Prize for her novel The Good Earth. She was the first American woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1938 for a rich and truly epic description of peasants' life in China and for her biographical masterpieces. She was a prominent advocate of the rights of women and the minority groups. Now, biography of the writer. Author name is Pearl S. Buck, Pearl Seidenstreicher Buck. Born 26 June 1892 in Hillsborough, West Virginia, United States. Died on 6 March 1973, Danby, Vermont, United States. Movies: The Good Earth, Pavilion of Woman, Dragon Seed, Saturn Never Stops, China Sky, China the Roots of Madness, Guide. Awards: Pulitzer Prize, Nobel Prize in Literature. And nationality? Her nationality was, she was an American writer. This was about the biography or life history of Pearl Seidenstreicher Buck. Next, I will show some images of this writer. This is her image in her old age. Now, this is when she was young. Now we will learn about the introduction of the story. It is the time of World War. An American prisoner of war is washed ashore in a dying state and is found at the doorstep of a Japanese doctor. Should he save him as a doctor or hand him over to the army as a patriot? The story is set during the Second World War. A Japanese doctor finds an American POW at his doorstep. He is in a dilemma that, being a doctor, should he save the wounded man, or being a Japanese, should he hand over the enemy to the army? This is the introduction of the story. You know, in this World War II, there was enmity between Japan and America. As you know, that America dropped bombs on two major cities of Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now next, theme of the story. Number first, the writer of the story conveys that there comes a time in a man's life when it is required for him to lift from petty considerations of race, nationality, and act in human consideration. Number two, Dr. Sadao, being patriotic Japanese, hates Americans as his enemies. One day, a prisoner of war appears at the show near Dr. Sadao's house, wounded, and Dr. Sadao and his wife Hannah move over their feelings of hatred towards him, and they treat him until he is capable of taking care of himself. Not only they treat him, but Dr. Sadao also helps him escape. He arranges all the things that are required for him to escape. By this humble and kind act, the theme of the story stands clear that humanity should rise above all. Number third, through the story, the writer also shows the impact of war on the life of normal people, and she does so by presenting an American wounded soldier who has to face the fury of the weather and the hostility of the Japanese people, the students. This was the theme of the story. Now, we will discuss about the summary of the story in detail. Now, let us begin the summary of the story. The scene of action is a spot on the Japanese coast. Dr. Sadao Hoki's house was a low, square stone-built house It was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach outlined with bent pines. Sadao's father had a deep concern for his son's education, so Sadao had been sent to America at 22 to learn all that could be learned of surgery and medicine there. He returned at 30. He became famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist also. It was the time of the World War. Japan was at war with America. Dr. Sadao had not been sent abroad with the troops. The old general was under medical treatment and he might need an operation. So, Dr. Sadao was being kept in Japan. So, Dr. Sadao was being kept in Japan in order to treat the old general in case of some emergency. Sadao watched mists hide outlines of a little island near the shore. Then it came creeping up the beach below his house. His wife Hannah came out and put his hand on his arm. It gave him pleasure. Then she laid her cheek against his arm. At this moment both of them saw something black come out of the mists. It was a man. He staggered a few steps, then the curled mists hid him again. Hannah and Sadao leaned over the railing of the veranda. They saw a man crawling on his hands and knees. Then he fell down on his face and lay there. They thought that it was perhaps a fisherman who had been washed from his boat. When they came towards him, they saw that he was wounded. He lay motionless. They saw his face. Hannah whispered that he was a white man. Sadao began to search for the wound. Blood followed freshly at his touch. In order to stanch the fearful bleeding, he packed the wound with the sea moss. The man was unconscious. He moaned with pain in his stupor, but he did not awaken. He moaned with pain in his stupor, but he did not awaken. Sadao muttered, "What shall we do with this man?" He said that the best thing that they could do was to put him back in the sea. Hannah agreed with it. Sadao explained that it was a difficult situation. If they sheltered a white man in their house, they would be arrested. If they turned him over as a prisoner, he would certainly die. They were staring upon the inert figure with a curious repulsion. Then they tried to find out what he was. He looked American. The battered cap had faint lettering U.S. Navy. They concluded that he was a sailor from an American warship. The man was a prisoner of war. He had escaped and was wounded in the back. Hannah asked Sadao if they were able to put him back into the sea. Sadao hesitated. If the man had been whole, he could be turned over to the police without difficulty, as he was his enemy. All Americans were his enemy. But since he was wounded, they should not throw him back to the sea. Hannah observed that there was only one thing left to do. They must carry him into their house. Sadao was not sure about the reaction of the servants. Hannah suggested that they must tell the servants that they intended to give him to the police. She said that they must do so, otherwise all of them would be in danger. Together they lifted the man. He was very light. They carried him up the steps and into the side door of the passage. They carried him to an empty bedroom. Since the man was quite dirty, Sadao suggested that he had better be washed. If she fetched the water, he could wash the man. Hannah could not bear him to touch the man. She offered to tell the maid Yumi. Sadao took the responsibility of informing others. The pallor of the unconscious man's face moved him first to stoop and feel his pulse. It was faint, but it was there. He put his hand against the man's cold breast. The heart too was yet alive. The man had to be washed first. However, the servants refused to do so. They did not want their master to heal the enemy. It was faint, but it was there. He put his hand against the man's cold breast. The heart too was yet alive. Sadaf observed that he would die unless operated upon. The man was very young, perhaps not even 25. The man had to be washed first. However, the servants refused to do so. They did not want to wash this person. Hannah washed the man till his upper body was quite clean. Sadaf put his instruments upon a sterilized towel. He began to wash the man's back carefully. He asked Hannah to give the anesthetic if he needed it. Hannah choked. She clapped her hands to her mouth and ran out of the room. He heard her retching in the garden. She had never seen an operation. Sadaf proceeded. Sadaf swiftly. Hannah came in. Sadaf asked her to saturate the cotton and hold it near his nostrils. She had to move it away a little when he breathed badly. Then Sadaf got busy. He felt the tip of his instrument strike against something hard. It was just near his kidney. Then with the cleanest and most precise incision, the bullet was out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. Sadaf gave him an injection, and the man's pulse grew stronger. Hannah had to serve the young man herself, for none of the servants would enter the room. The man grew stronger day by day. The servants decided to quit if their master kept the enemy hidden there. On the seventh day, the servants left together. Hannah carried the morning food to the prisoner. On coming back, she asked Sadaf why they could not see clearly what they ought to do. In the afternoon, a messenger came in official uniform. He asked Dr. Sadaf to come to the palace at once as the old general was in pain. Hannah breathed a sigh of relief. When Sadaf came to say goodbye, she revealed her fear. She had thought that they had come to arrest him. Sadaf promised to get rid of that man for her sake. Sadaf promised to get rid of that man for her sake. Sadaf told the general about the man he had operated upon. The general acknowledged why Sadaf was indispensable to him. The general promised to send his private assassins to kill the man and remove his body. He asked Sadaf to leave the outer partition of the white man's room to the garden open while he slept. Sadaf went home, thinking over the plan. He would tell Hannah nothing. He was surprised to see the young American out of bed and preparing to go into the garden. He complained that the muscles on one side felt stiff. Dr. Sadaf said that exercise and massage would be helpful. He then asked Tom, the young American, to go to bed. Sadaf slept badly that night. The next morning, Sadaf went to the guest room and found him asleep. The second night also passed. The young man was still there. He had shaved himself. There was a faint color on his cheeks. Dr. Sadaf told him that he was quite well. Then he offered to put his boat on the shore that night. It would have food and extra clothing in it. Tom might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. It had not been fortified. Nobody lived there as it was submerged in storm. Since it was not the season of storm, he could live there till he saw a Korean fishing boat pass by. As soon as it was dark, Sadaf made preparations to help the young man escape. He gave him his flashlight. He gave him his flashlight. He asked him to give him two flashes as the sun set in case his food ran out. In case he was still there and all right, he was to signal him only one. He was warned not to signal in darkness, for it would be seen. The prisoner was now dressed in Japanese clothes. A black cloth was wrapped round his blond head. He found the way to the boat. Sadov waited till he saw one flash from the shore. Dr. Rao had been called in the night to perform an emergency operation on the general. It involved his gallbladder. For 12 hours, Sadov had not been sure the general would live. Then he began to breathe deeply again and to demand for food. Sadov had not been able to ask about the assassins. So far as he knew, they had never come. The servants had returned. The room was cleaned. 1 week after the operation, 1 week after the operation, Sadov felt that the general was well enough to be spoken to about the prisoner. Sadov informed him that the prisoner had escaped. The general asked the doctor whether he had not promised to kill the man for the doctor. He then confessed the truth. He had been suffering a great deal. So he thought of nothing but himself. He had forgotten his promise. That night, Sadov waited at dusk for the light from the island. There was none. His prisoner had gone away and was safe. Sadov wondered why he could not kill the young man, though white people were repulsive. Dear students, this was the summary of the story. So, in today's video, we learned about the author, about the introduction of the story, about the theme of the story, and lastly, about the summary of the story. And as you know, the enemy story has been written by Pearl Sidden Striker Buck, or Pearl S. Buck. Hope you have enjoyed this video very much. Have a nice day. Have a bright future. Thank you.